Hi, welcome back to Our Maine Homestead. Today we're going to talk about building a homestead from scratch.
For some people, starting a homestead means working with what they have in their own backyard, or buying an old farmhouse and fixing it up, or even taking over a working farm and making it their own. But we wanted to share with you guys how we started our homestead from scratch, working with raw land and building it into what it is today, and just some of the things that we learned along the way.
So a few years ago, Francesca and I were working in the veterinary profession and decided it was time for a change. Initially, that change took the form of traveling full-time, but throughout that whole process, a recurring theme was always talking about how we would eventually settle down, buy our own place, start our own home, which has turned into a homestead, but live a simpler life where we could be more self-sufficient, kind of self-sustainable, but have a more natural way of life.
The first steps in getting our homestead dreams to take off was, before we even looked at any properties or anything like that, we decided to sit down and write out a list that essentially was a wish list for our ideal homestead and our ideal property to do this on.
Yeah, so one of the first things that always popped up in my head was a water feature, something like a stream, a brook that we ended up with. We have a huge pond as well. We got a lot more than we looked for initially. We also didn't know whether she's wanting to be in the video, I guess. We weren't really focused at that point on having a property with an existing cabin or home or structure or buying existing farmland. We kind of were leaning more toward more forested land with just sufficient clearings to do what we wanted to do. We didn't want to come into a situation where we had to do a lot of clearing of the land. That is extremely hard work, time consuming. We wanted a little bit quicker start to this.
And during our travels, I think we realized that we definitely preferred trees over desert, and so that was a major factor in the locations that we were thinking about looking into.
We knew we kind of wanted to live off the beaten path. We wanted to live in a fairly remote area, but still close enough to amenities that you could access, but we're kind of private people in a way. And we also wanted to live in kind of a low population area. We knew we didn't want to live really close to major cities, a lot of people, influx of a lot of people. So once we had our list of what we were looking for in specific properties, it was time to narrow down where we were going to look.
So again, based on that wish list and based on our travels and what we discovered along the way, we had several locations that we were interested in, but we really narrowed it down to two general locations, which were the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Northern Maine. They really just ticked all the boxes on our wish list.
Yeah, we really loved them both. We spent a fair amount of time in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and fell in love with it. It had everything we really wanted. Probably the main tipping point that led us to Northern Maine versus Michigan was just regulations. The government, we talked to a lot of people, and there's a lot of oversight and regulation in the state of Michigan that wouldn't allow us to do some of the things we really wanted to do that Maine definitely allowed us to do. So it came down to freedom.
When we started searching for properties, we were actually located in South Carolina, and we were looking in Maine, of course, so it wasn't as easy as just driving over to look at properties. So it really started with a lot of online searches, and then once we had several on our list of potentials, we decided to get on the phone and start talking to the realtors who were sharing these properties.
So we started our online search with just a general Google, obviously easiest place to start. There's so much out there. It'll lead you kind of down some rabbit holes sometimes, so you have to be a little careful. But we have a friend in Upper Michigan that had told us about LandWatch that has properties all over the country, I think all over the world. But anyway, we got on there, and you just put in your criteria for where you're searching, just like most search sites. But it's very easy to use. You can save a list of properties you're interested in and come back and visit, or share them with your spouse or whoever if they're not right there or not looking with you at the time. So while searching on LandWatch, it led us to some other sites, because you're going to find the realty company that has properties listed on LandWatch. So we did use some other sites, but by far LandWatch was the most used site in our search, and that's where we found the properties that we were initially interested in northern Maine.
So together we came up with a short list of properties that we for sure were interested in and really wanted to get more detail on. So that's when we took the next step and called the realtor in charge of these properties to just really fine-tune some of the details and get as much information as we could about them.
And through that process, we made another kind of short list on questions to ask about individual properties. These questions are probably more specific depending on what we saw in the listing. And a good realtor will provide information you don't even ask about in these kind of Q&A sessions, and answer some questions that you haven't even thought of yet at that stage. And that was kind of what happened with us and led us to the guy that we ended up buying a property from.
Yeah, and after talking to him on the phone and getting some of these questions answered, we got the ball rolling for trying to decide a good time frame for us to come up and actually visit these properties and just get our boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground brings us to our next thing on the list, which is go visit the property. It can be very tempting to find a property that looks ideal, almost perfect, if not perfect, online, and be maybe concerned that someone else is going to scoop the property up because it looks so good before you get a chance to go look, especially if you're not local. But I can't stress the importance of going to actually physically look at the property and see what it's like to get to it and what the features are actually like in person.
It's really easy to get caught up in the excitement of this new venture that you're about to embark on, and a lot of people that we know have actually purchased properties sight unseen based on what they look like online, and nobody wants to be catfished when it comes to buying real estate, right? For example, one of the properties that we had that was way high on our list of just really good looking properties, we got here and it did match a lot of the things that it said online, but one of the things that it only touched on briefly was the fact that it had a 4.5-mile driveway that was basically a right-of-way road that was unmaintained. And when we got there and started driving it, even though it was the summertime, it was really difficult getting back there. So we could only imagine how much more difficult it would be in the winter time. Another property that looked really great online, they had really nice photos of different aspects of the property. When we got there, the description had said that it had recently been logged, and the pictures online did not really reflect what it was like in real life. So in person, it was basically demolished. It looked like
it had basically been clear cut in all of the accessible areas. There was a huge swamp area that was not accessible to be logged. Other than that, the rest of the property was basically just leveled. Pictures had been taken before the logging had been done. So you have to really be careful about buying something sight unseen. So that brings us to another point, and something we didn't know to put on our initial wish list, but we realized when we got to some of the properties, and we knew Maine had a lot of water. There's a ton of water in Maine, but you don't really see, and they're not going to show you a lot of swampy areas in the photos online when they're advertising a property. So one thing to really look for when you get on the ground, if you're in an area like we are, is to really look at how much high ground there is versus low-lying areas, especially if there's water on the property like a brook and a pond that we have, and how much land is actually usable and accessible. You could find a property that's 200 acres and you may only be able to use 40 acres of it because the rest of it is not easily or ever accessible. So that's another important reason to actually put boots on the ground and experience the property firsthand so you can see what it's actually going to be like living there.
So after visiting some of these properties and just getting a feel for what was out there and what we were interested in, we decided that one of the properties was going to be ours. And so we put in an offer for it, it was accepted, and now what do? We've got over 200 acres in the North Woods of Maine, and what do we do now?
With nothing on it, nowhere to live, no structures whatsoever. It's all woods and a few small clearings.
Something we had discussed beforehand, but that we really needed to buckle down on, was making our priority list. And our priority list was basically establishing what our immediate goals were and what our long-term goals were.
So we had to prioritize our list because we didn't have a roof over our head. We lived in a tent for the first 6 weeks we were on the property while we worked on other projects, getting ready, trying to get ready for the winter.
For us, our immediate goals at that time, since it was September, we were getting close into winter, the immediate goals really involved getting a roof over our head, getting a structure built to store our belongings, and stockpiling wood for heating the cabin during the winter, things like that, versus the long-term goals, which were going to be establishing some garden plots that we could start growing our own food, bringing on animals that we really wanted to have on the farm, like chickens, sheep.
We knew we had time for the long-term goals, and we actually did a lot of the long-term goal planning stuff over the winter. Our main focus was really making sure we could make it through the winter. She's going to check on the baby. She'll be right back.
So after establishing your priority list, literally it's just time to break ground and get to work. So a lot of the things that we learned along the way were just to really be flexible with our plans, because plans and ideas change whether you're in the planning process or whether you're on your property and you're starting to get things done. Also, as Eddie learned, it is really important to sometimes delegate some tasks. It doesn't make it any less of a homestead if you have to outsource some projects, just to be able to get some things done in a timely manner.
My instinct is to do everything myself. That's what I want to accomplish here long term, and we want to be self-sufficient.
He would really enjoy to do a lot of the things himself, to really learn how it was done in the past, and so that he can bring it into the present day, and just so that everything is really hands-on, and this homestead was built by our hands from the ground up.
Yeah, that's not always practical, just because, number one, I've never done almost anything that we've done here. So number two, it would take forever. It'd be great to step right in here and be living like we want to live, all natural, and have everything we need, but that's not the luxury we have. We have to start from scratch. So eventually we want to have horses here and use the horses to do the majority of the work. But right off the bat, you can't do that, obviously. So we have a Kawasaki mule and our truck that does the majority of the work. But over time, we want to transition into using horses and doing everything within reason without machines.
And a lot of this is just basically trial and error, and it's always going to be a work in progress. And one of the quotes that we really love is that if you've only done it once, you haven't done it right yet. And that basically can be applied to anything in the homesteading world, for sure.
My instinct is to do a lot of research and figure out how exactly I want to do it way before I do it, but I've learned just doing it is the only way you're going to get things done. You can sit and think of and talk about it all day long, but until you get your hands dirty, nothing's going to actually happen. And just because you haven't done it right doesn't mean it doesn't work. You just might not have done it the way you intended to do it. We've done a lot of things that we know aren't perfect, because there's no such thing, but they're functional and they work. If we had to do it over again, would we do it differently? Yeah, we would tweak it and make it more of what we had in mind to start with, but it's still functional and serves our purpose, which is all we intended for it to do.
So we hope that gives you some insight into how we started our homestead from scratch.
Francesca had to go take care of the little homesteader, but thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button and come along with us on our homesteading journey, and leave us a comment and or questions in the comment section. We'll be glad to answer whatever we can about our journey up to this point. Again, thanks for watching and happy homesteading.